And if you lead with compromise, I would say that's a failure. There's no compromise on killing a child, and that needs to be the platform and the position of every pro-life candidate. But pro-lifers, for some reason, sometimes are so quick to just bow down to any candidate who looks their way. We are a powerful constituency, but if we're not using our power, we're going to get lame candidates who are not going to make a difference. There's no states' rights when it comes to killing babies, period. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lila Rose Podcast. And today we're doing things a little differently. We're not interviewing a guest. We're going to be doing a really fun deep dive into the 2024 election. Yeah, it's coming up. Can you believe it's almost 2024? We're going to talk about the candidates, especially, of course, from a pro-life perspective. What's going on there? Some of the recent pro-life political developments. It's been in the news a lot. And then we're going to do a fun segment on an Ask Me Anything. I've gotten some great questions from you guys. I put out an Ask Me Anything on Facebook and Instagram, and I've got a lot of questions in, and I'm excited to answer some. So thank you, everybody, again, for listening to the podcast, for rating it. Don't forget to subscribe. If you are on YouTube, go check out the new YouTube page, and let's get into it. 2024 is just around the corner. I can't believe how quickly it's coming. And already we've got, I think it's now 6 candidates who have announced their candidacy for the Republican side. We've just heard from President Biden just this week that he will be running for president in 2024. Nobody is surprised by that. Shocker. And we also heard, by the way, from President Biden and the Democrats that they will not be allowing any debates in the Democratic primary. This means that President Biden will effectively go unchallenged in the primary. There won't really be a primary. And instead, he's going to go straight into contending with whatever Republican gets the nomination. So again, not a shocker there. I want to just give a little context on President Biden and the Democrats before we dive into the Republicans. Did you know that President Biden would be 86 years old at the end of his second term? So he's somebody that is hanging on in politics. And I mean, Nancy Pelosi was similar, hanging on in politics. And I would say, please hang on if it was somebody that was fighting for truth and justice and our values. But unfortunately, horribly tragically, President Biden, apart from the accusations about his mental fitness, is absolutely corrupt when it comes to our values and fighting for the most vulnerable. And I want to share that a little bit because he comes across in media appearances, President Biden, as this kind of grandfatherly type figure who will like have an ice cream cone. And if you look at media, you would think that he is your grandpa. I mean, the media makes him out to be this very genteel, compromiser in a good way, bringing people together, not a divider, a uniter. And that is anything but the reality. The reality is that President Biden is actually more extreme on abortion than President Obama was. Can you believe that? So I don't know if you remember President Obama's abortion position, but he was actually against the Born Alive Infants Protection Act as a state senator before he ended up running for national office. He actually was against protecting children who survived abortion attempts and giving them basic medical care. That was his track record before entering the national scene. When he entered the national scene, he was in support of abortions through all 9 months of pregnancy at the federal level enshrined for any reason. So that was his position. And now President Biden has not only taken on that legacy of being pro-abortion through all 9 months for any reason at the federal level, he is against every abortion restriction possible. He doesn't want any abortion restrictions. He wants abortion codified as a constitutional right federally for any reason at any point in pregnancy. But President Biden also has been on this really absurd crusade. I call it absurd because it logically doesn't even make sense. This absurd crusade against pro-lifers who are trying to save lives. An example, of course, is Mark Houck, who Biden's FBI and Department of Justice have been terrorizing pro-life supporters who are doing work on the sidewalks peacefully to care for mothers outside of abortion clinics. And Biden had his FBI raid the home of Mark Houck, a father of 8 children, because Mark had been praying outside abortion clinics peacefully for years. And so he sent a SWAT team with guns drawn at 6 a.m. in the morning over a dozen agents to Mark Hawk's home in Pennsylvania. This was just a year and a half ago now. And he was there they were there to terrorize the family. At 6 a.m., they knock on the door, and they're banging on the door, I should say. They're not knocking, they're banging, let us in, open the door. Mark Hawk is, in his shorts. His kids are just waking up, and they're all of these agents with their guns trained at him and his family when he opens that door. And then they just take him in handcuffs, ultimately away from the family home. And what was his crime? His crime was peacefully praying outside an abortion clinic, and at one point a very pro-abortion angry escort. An escort is effectively a volunteer for Planned Parenthood that goes and makes sure that women who are going there for an appointment, who are pregnant, who are going to have an abortion, do not have access to any resources that the pro-life people might have to offer them on the sidewalk. So there's always this war playing out on the sidewalk where pro-lifers have resources and they want to offer women resources. The pro-life sidewalk counselor is saying, we have other options for you. You can go to this pro bono confidential center. We'll give you resources. And the escorts are there to oftentimes scream or yell or direct the woman away from the pro-lifers. In this case, this particular pro-abortion escort at Planned Parenthood in Philadelphia was actually approaching Mark and his young son, his teenage son, yelling profanities at them, getting up in their face. Mark tried to get away from him, tried to walk away, get his son away, and he was threatening his son. So Mark pushed him out of the son's way, and that's why the FBI showed up at his door. And there were no charges, pressed. There was no police investigation. They dropped it because, the escort tried to get Mark in trouble for it, but they're like, you don't have a case. But the FBI made a case out of it because it's the pro-abortion Biden, DOJ, and FBI. Anyways, point here is President Biden, even more than President Obama, wants to use the power of the state to oppress people who disagree. Now maybe Obama would have done more of it if it had been more normalized at the time, but politics have gotten so heated in the last several years, I think especially post-pandemic and everything else, that the powers of the state being used as a weapon against your political opponents, I think is at an all-time high in its use on the pro-abortion side against pro-lifers. So Mark Hawk, thankfully, it actually ended up going to trial, his case, and he was completely acquitted of all charges. He won a jury trial. The jury said he was totally innocent and he's a free man, but he was terrorized. He and his family were terrorized by our own government. Now, if you're listening, by the way, quick side note, and you are involved in pro-life work, do not stop. Persevere. The good news is rule of law does prevail, and Mark won his case. And there's pro bono legal support that wants to help you win your case. If you ever have a case, Live Action, my nonprofit organization, is there to help folks. So don't back down. Now is not the time to back down. Okay, get off from that and back to the 2024 candidates. So you got President Biden, most pro-abortion president in U.S. history. And he has increased Planned Parenthood's funding to an unprecedented amount. They're receiving $1.8 billion a year, or $1.8 million a day in taxpayer funds. And his vice president is Kamala Harris. And Vice President Kamala Harris was the same Attorney General of California that went after my good friend David Daleiden to send agents to his home to raid it for daring to investigate Planned Parenthood for their selling of baby body parts. And Kamala Harris, the same time she was using the powers of state against David Daleiden, was doing fundraisers for Planned Parenthood. So think about this. An investigative journalist goes after an extremely corrupt, basically government entity in the state of California and other states, exposing the most heinous crimes against children. And the response from the political powers that be, instead of taking that evidence and running with it to stop the abusers of children, the harmers of children, is to go and rally for the abusers, for Planned Parenthood, try to get money from them for their candidacy, because she was running for, at the time, Senate, and then send the state after the investigative journalist. It's completely crazy. Thankfully, David's work did lead to real ramifications, consequences for the abortion industry. And in Orange County, the district attorney in Orange County actually won a case against the middleman that was selling some of the body parts from Planned Parenthood to other companies and got them shut down. So David's work did lead to real penalties for some of these horrific actors, but not because of Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris went after David Daleiden. She also went after pregnancy centers. Pregnancy centers where you go and you give care for mothers and children. There's free diapers, there's free formula, there's free parenting classes, job placement for young moms and families. And she doesn't like that. And so she went after them to try to force them to put abortion notices or advertisements in their facilities, because how dare they not provide abortion? So this is just one example. She's also obviously for abortion up until birth for any reason. She's a close friend of Planned Parenthood. She was just rallying in Los Angeles for Planned Parenthood and pro-abortion groups, saying that we need to protect the right to abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. So that is who is in line to be president if Joe Biden doesn't make it and passes away on the job. That is who we get, or he has to step down because of medical issues or health issues. So it's a pretty clear cut in my book that whoever's coming from the Republican side on the life issue is going to be better than that. It'll be hard for them not to be. Let's just put it that way. So that's gonna be how we're gonna start this. I am not a passionate 1,000% in Republican personally, by the way. I'm not somebody who's really loving politics and can't wait for the next election. It's so exciting. For me, elections are very heavy things because they are determining the fate of so many people. In some ways, our fate, the people listening to this podcast, you guys, me, our families, but also preborn children. Laws really do matter. In states that ban abortion, thousands of lives are saved. In states that don't ban abortion or pay for abortions like California, thousands and even millions of lives are lost. So this is life or death. And so it's heavy for me. It's not fun, but I think it's key that we're all educated. And that's why we're doing this podcast. Before getting into the Republican candidates, 2 other things. Number one, obviously I'm saying this in my personal capacity as the Lila Rose Podcast. This is not Live Action's position or Live Action's role in any way. Our role as a nonprofit is to educate. My podcast is independent, and so we get to talk about politics and ultimately take sides with candidates, which is a prohibited thing for a non-for-profit 501c3 to do. So just a quick note on that. We're going to have a special guest in this discussion, actually, which will be Noah Brandt. And he is from the Live Action team. He's our awesome Vice President of Communications and Gov Relations. But he is here 100% in his personal capacity. He's from the great state of Missouri. He is here to talk a little bit shop about the Republican candidates because he's very passionate about this, of course, personally, too, as you might imagine. The other thing I'm going to say is the context here, beyond who's on the Democratic side, is my philosophy when it comes to the strategic approach that we should take as pro-lifers in politics. And this is something I'm really passionate about. Noah's really passionate about too. So you'll hear him talking about this. But I actually just had a piece in the Wall Street Journal talking about this strategic position. And the title of the piece was "The Pro-Life Movement Can't Lead with Compromise." The pro-life movement can't lead with compromise. The reason this is so important, guys, is because everybody's saying to compromise right now. Everybody. Pro-lifers, even some leaders, are saying to compromise on abortion because that's the only way you're going to win. And I think that's completely false. I think that's totally a lie. And it's a lie coming from the pro-abortion media, who are so invested in getting us to fail. They want us to fail. The pro-abortion side wants to win. They want us to fail. So they're doing probably the smartest thing that they can do, which is persuade us that we can't even win to begin with. And so why bother? And so you got Roe v. Wade overruled. All right, just like hold tight for this magical moment at some point in the future when maybe then you can win, and don't do anything too aggressive now because you're just going to lose. That's what they're saying. And unfortunately, that's what some Republican candidates are saying. And it's pretty messed up. And we're going to talk about that. But what I said in this piece is that we need to, as the pro-life movement, always lead with the truth. And that includes pro-life candidates. And the truth is that human life doesn't begin at birth. It doesn't begin at 15 weeks pre-birth. It doesn't begin at 8 weeks pre-birth or 7 weeks. It begins at fertilization. And that human life is worth defending. And that human rights are universal and inalienable, meaning you have them no matter what. They're inherent to you. Everybody has them, whether you're born or pre-born, and you don't magically get them at some magical age, pre-birth or post-birth. And that our law, our legal system has a responsibility. It's not even a responsibility. It is the whole idea of a legal system to begin with, to have law and order based on justice, based on just principles, equal treatment under the law. And this is our Constitution. Our 14th Amendment in our Constitution declares equal protection for all people. And it also declares that no state shall have the right to deprive anyone of their life without due process. Well, there's zero due process right now for preborn children in the womb. Absolutely zero. And a preborn child in the womb is equally human to a child outside of the womb and equally human to you and to me. So by our own 14th Amendment in our own Constitution, abortion should be eradicated. It should be immediately illegal. It's like homicide. It should not even exist. So this whole debate of like the federal versus the states, who has the job to protect children? Should the states get to decide? Everyone said, okay, Roe v. Wade's overruled. Abortion is now back to the states. You've probably heard this phrase. Abortion is back to the states for the states to decide. States shouldn't get to decide whether or not you have your constitutional protections. They don't get to decide that. A mob of voters at a voting booth doesn't get to write away protections for Black people, doesn't get to write away protections for women, doesn't get to write away protections for disabled people. Just because you are a democratic republic and you're having a vote is going to a democratic body doesn't mean that democratic body has the right to vote on anything. There are certain things that a democracy does not have the right to decide. And that includes fundamental human rights, constitutional protections. Those are not to be voted down by a democracy or human rights. If you have a right to life, that's inalienable, that's universal, it's inviolable, it cannot be violated. Even if you have an oppressive mob come over and say, I don't think so, I want to kill you because we're strong and powerful, we're adults and you're a little baby in the womb and you're encroaching on my freedom and my autonomy, so we should be able to kill you. That's not justice, and that's not the right of a democracy to do. So the whole idea of abortion going back to the states is nonsense. It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It's not just. And I want to strike it from the lexicon of politics among those who claim to be pro-life. If you are a pro-life leader, person, candidate, you're going around talking about states' rights and abortion, I want to strike that entirely from our lexicon because there's no states' rights when it comes to killing babies, period. Just like there should be no states' rights when it comes to slavery. No, we fought a civil war over that. And I don't want to fight a civil war over this. I want us to get it right. And that starts with pro-life leaders getting it right. And so pro-life leaders, including pro-life candidates who want your pro-life vote, should be bold and lead and say, human rights begin in the womb. We're going to fight for them. And we want complete legal protection for children. Our laws should reflect what the Constitution already declares. And so what does that mean in the practical? Well, let's talk about that. So my piece in the Wall Street Journal called The Pro-Life Movement Can't Lead with Compromise was in part a response to my good friend Ryan Anderson. You may have heard of him. He's at the Ethics and Public Policy Center in DC. Very smart guy, wonderful guy. And he had a piece called The Republicans Can Reset the Abortion Debate. And he had some really great things to say in his piece. But what he said that I disagree with was this. He writes, running on an absolutist pro-life platform now is the mirror image of the mistake Democrats have made running on an absolutist pro-abortion platform. So he's basically saying to be completely pro-life is a mistake because the opposition is completely pro-abortion. And my response is no. And that's my piece, right? So if you read my piece, I go on and I say, pro-life candidates should always lead with the truth. Elective abortion is an act of violence. There's no compromise on killing a child. And that needs to be the platform and the position of every pro-life candidate. Now, what that looks like once legislation is debated on in different committees and once different deals are struck in a legislature and once bills are actually eventually get to a governor to sign at the state level or to the president at the federal level, that's a different process. I'm talking about what you lead with. And if you lead with compromise, you say, I'm going to run on a 15-week abortion ban. I would say that's a failure. President Biden isn't going out there saying, I'm going to run on abortion is only legal at 20 weeks. I mean, he's out there saying abortion is a constitutional right. He's inflaming his base who are now committed to him. But pro-lifers, for some reason, sometimes are so quick to just bow down to any candidate who like looks their way and says, oh, I think I'm pro-life too. I'm personally pro-life anyways, but the pro-lifer's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. No, guys, there's a lot of us out there. There are millions of hardcore pro-lifers out there. I mean, Live Action's email list alone, as an example, it's over 1 million people who are passionately pro-life. SBA list has millions of members, and they're a C4. They're actually getting involved in elections. Our good friends at the Susan B. Anthony list. We are a powerful constituency, but if we're not using our power, we're going to get lame candidates who are not going to make a difference. So anyways, I go on to say, listen, if we are winsome in communicating the pro-life message, we win people over. But if we instead focus on compromising our principles, we will not win anybody over and we will actually lose people. So that's the bottom line. And I'm going to just read the last bit that I wrote here. The pro-abortion left enters the debate with its full agenda intact. The pro-abortion left enters the debate with its full agenda intact, not compromising until legislative reality leaves them no other choice. If we communicate the choice about the right to life, we will win minds and elections and save lives. Instead of leading with compromise, the pro-life movement must lead with courage and strength. And people might say, well, that's not really how it's working in today's elections, but that's not true. And we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to bring in Noah Brandt. Noah, are you there?
I'm here.
Fantastic.
I'm enjoying it, Lila. Yeah, that end was strong. That's the thing I don't understand about the pro-life movement so often, even working in politics for my whole career that as I've done. The pro-abortion left, they don't compromise literally until they have to. And what I mean by that is they don't run in elections talking about compromise. They run saying we're going to have abortion up until birth. It's going to be paid for by taxpayers. Mm-hmm. And then once they're in the room where the sausage is made, sometimes they don't get their entire loaf. But they inspire people and they win, hearts and minds, honestly, by going for the whole loaf. And that's what the pro-life movement needs to do.
Well, I think it's also a matter of obviously principle, but when you look at how elections are actually playing out today, the opposition is saying, and by opposition, I mean the pro-abortion people as well as some pro-life people are saying, well, we're losing elections because of life. Post Dobbs, there was a big backlash. Post Roe v. Wade's fall last summer, there's a big backlash. So we're losing elections because of life. I don't see it that way. I know you don't see it that way. What are your thoughts?
Well, there's a couple important points. For one, the fall of Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs v. Jackson decision in June 24th of 2022 was like a huge 50-year generational win for the pro-life movement. And just the political reality, it's like gravity. A political reality is that losses are oftentimes more galvanizing than victories. So the pro-abortion left was extremely galvanized by that loss. And then conversely, the pro-life movement, many of them, since many unfortunately were not properly educated, thought, okay, Roe v. Wade is over, so maybe we're done? Like, is the country pro-life now? Have we ended abortion? And so a mismatch of that, the left being galvanized and the pro-life movement, many of them feeling like the fight is over, has meant that the rest of 2022 was not a very strong year for pro-life candidates. And I think a lot of pro-life candidates were unprepared to talk about their position beyond Roe v. Wade being bad. And Roe v. Wade was bad, right? Roe v. Wade said there's a constitutional right to kill a child. Absolutely crazy. That's not in the Constitution. But there is a lot more to do, like you talked about with the 14th Amendment, with equal protection that we need to extend towards preborn children. And so I think that we were left in a tough place. And even at one other example, right, is we just had a couple weeks ago in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, they elect their state judges. And Wisconsin has a abortion ban that's been on the books for like 100 years. And Roe v. Wade made it unenforceable, but it's been being enforced for the past couple months. So abortion, currently is unavailable in Wisconsin, but a case is coming to the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, to their state judges who are elected. And there was a very fierce competition, very expensive, fierce competition between a pro-life judge and a pro-choice judge. And the pro-choice judge won. She won by 10 percentage points. But something that just is galling, the biggest issue in the election was abortion. They talked all about abortion, both candidates, quite a bit. 40% of ads from the left progressive pro-abortion side mentioned abortion, 40%. 1% of ads from the pro-life candidate, the group supporting him, mentioned abortion. So the lesson here, I think, is if you don't play, you don't win.
Was the pro-life candidate in that judge's race in Wisconsin, was it a he or she?
A he.
Was he talking persuasively about abortion, or did he kind of run away from it?
Ran away from it.
Okay. This happened last fall with the midterms. Tell us more about that, actually, Noah, because I know we've talked about that a lot before. What happened in the midterms last fall? People said, oh, pro-life lost so badly in the midterms, and therefore we shouldn't to continue to run on it. But what really happened?
Well, I mean, the 2022 midterms in the fall, they were a mixed bag for pro-life voters. Pro-life forces did take control of the House of Representatives, which is a big deal and which is a good thing. We did not win the Senate. We lost a couple key salient Senate races, right? Two that I think of a lot is Pennsylvania. Dr. Oz, the Republican and ostensibly pro-life candidate, lost in Pennsylvania.
Who was not pro-life. I mean,
that's a big part of the problem. Is we have people like Dr. Oz, who's been pro-abortion his entire career. And as a doctor, been pro-abortion. And so saying he speaks pro-life as a second language is an understatement. It's like, is he even sincerely pro-life? He wasn't good at talking about it. He barely mentioned it. And so what happens, it's like if you're playing basketball and, you're doing man-on-man defense, but one side isn't actually defending. And so the other side is scoring, and the other side isn't defending. Because if your opponent is pillaring you as a pro-life extremist who wants to do all these things that are unpopular, and you refuse to say the word abortion or talk about when life begins or why children deserve protection, an attack unanswered is an attack accepted. You know what I mean, Lila?
It's so true. And that's what happened in the midterm is we were outspent. The pro-life, you mentioned 1% of pro-life money spent in this Senate or in this Supreme Court race, this court race versus 40% pro-abortion money spent. In the fall of last year during the midterms, the months leading up to the midterms, it was, I think, $1 pro-life dollar for every 32, was it 32 to 40? It was over $30 to every $1 pro-abortion money versus pro-life money. So the pro-abortion side outspent the pro-life side dramatically. I mean, dramatically. And so this whole talking point.
And you have other candidates, right? Like Herschel Walker in Georgia, another extremely important Senate race. Georgia's a pro-life state that has a very popular pro-life governor, Brian Kemp, who was reelected by a wide margin. But then you have Herschel Walker, the Senate candidate, who did speak pro-life language, but was credibly accused of paying for multiple abortions in his own personal life.
I did not.
Is that galvanizing to pro-life voters, Lila?
I did not cry when Herschel Walker lost. I mean, it's sad that he was beat by a pro-abortion maniac, effectively. It was a mania, how pro-abortion the Democrat side is right now. But yes, I mean, the problem is if you put forth bad candidates and they're not talking winsomely on life, and then you don't spend any money to defend the pro-life position, don't go around blaming the pro-life message for your failure as a leader and your failure as running a campaign. But unfortunately, that's what this weird thing has happened. It's like the pro-life community has become this scapegoat. And basically, preborn children have become the scapegoat. Defending preborn children is so hard to do that I can't keep doing it. You didn't even try. And the proof that I have and that we have, Noah, for why you can win when you try is states like Texas. And increasingly states like Florida. And let's talk about that for a minute. People say, well, it's so unpopular to do abortion bans. Texas has an abortion ban right now. Governor Abbott won his reelection governor campaign despite incredible opposition. Governor DeSantis won in a landslide victory in Florida, his reelection campaign. And he just passed the heartbeat ban in Texas. Now, they have exceptions in the law that I don't like, exceptions for children conceived in rape and incest, that it's okay to kill those children. It's only protecting children after 6 weeks, but it's a big step forward from the 15-week abortion ban that the state had before that. And he got a lot of pushback. I mean, people were saying, 15-week abortion ban is enough. Like, if you go any more extreme than that, then it's going to be unpopular. Did you know that 62% of Floridians support the heartbeat law in Texas, including a majority of Democrats? Yeah, a majority of Democrats support the heartbeat law in Texas, according to the latest polling. So what are any other thoughts on that, Noah?
Well, I'll
just on how popular these laws actually are when it's coupled with leadership that is persuasive and unapologetic.
Well, I'll say I give a lot of credit to, just in my personal capacity, to Governor DeSantis. He won this huge reelection. He had political capital to spend, but political capital, as in using your influence to do something, it's always limited. And so him using his political capital to take Florida from a 15-week state where you could get an abortion up to 15 weeks to 6 weeks is going to save thousands and thousands of lives, and it is going to stop Florida from being an abortion destination. We just had some numbers come out. So every 10 years, right, the country does a census. but there's little updates every single year that you can look for if you know where to find them. And so even in this last census from 2010 to 2020, states like Texas and Florida grew by the millions. States like California lost hundreds of thousands. But data just came out from July of 2021 to July of 2022. So the most recent data. Get this, Lila. California loses 218,000 people. In that same time, Texas gains 350,000 and Florida gains 444,000. And so these are people moving from pro-abortion states, right? Illinois and New York, with some of the other most extreme pro-abortion states, also lost significant amounts of people. And they're moving to states that value life. And there's a lot of other good reasons to move to those states. But I think that it's like if pro-life laws were as anathemic or as unpopular as the media likes to tell us, then people will be fleeing these states. But instead, people are fleeing the abortion havens and moving to the places that protect life.
I hope that those that flee don't go try to promote pro-abortion law in their other states. I mean, it's a mixed bag, right? Because the people leaving California, I mean, we're in California, obviously I'm in California, and I believe still in the future of the state. I think we still have a future. It's going to be rough, but we got to hang in there. And a lot of the people leaving, unfortunately, many of them are good people that we need their votes. And then some of them are maybe, like you're saying, maybe people who support abortion, but they don't support it so much that they wouldn't move to Florida or Texas, as you say. So I think, listen, I've been in this media world since I was a teenager, and I have seen the power of a narrative, a completely false narrative, to effectively brainwash everyday good people and get people to live a lie and believe a lie. And I think that's what's happening right now with this whole pro-life is a losing issue, is it is a brainwashing narrative that you say the truth and the lie enough times, it becomes just reality for people that we're just getting blasted with from left and right. That, oh, it's a state's issue, it's not a federal issue. Oh, let the states do what they want. Oh, it's not a winning issue. And then when somebody like DeSantis dares to pass a 6-week abortion ban, despite his little consultants telling him don't do it, and he passes it, and then he gets a majority of Democrat support in his own state, where's the headline on that?
Amen.
Where's the headline on that? The headlines I saw after Governor DeSantis passed the heartbeat law 2 weeks ago was, did he just jeopardize his future run? I mean, that was the headline. Majority of Democrats supported it in his state. I'm going to say that 10 times, get that narrative into the true narrative into our head. Or I did a Twitter Spaces after that. Twitter Spaces is this thing for Twitter geeks where you go into this big online room and you talk to each other. And there are several thousand people in it. And the Twitter Spaces was, oh, did DeSantis sink his career with this heartbeat law? And I'm like, what are you guys even talking about? He's wildly popular, and the majority of even Democrats support this. And a good majority of the state supports this. And yet you're talking like he just killed his career. Like, where did that narrative come from? And unfortunately, some folks on the pro-life side, so to speak, is supporting that narrative. So we're going deep here. Let's get into it. The candidates, the 2024 candidates. And I know, Noah, you have a lot of opinions here.
Yes. Listen, Lila, unlike you, I love this stuff. I love the political reality show a bit,
Yes.
Who's in, who's out, who's going to win, who's going to lose.
That's why you're good at your job. Okay, so where to start? I'm going to start with the big guy. I'm going to start with President Trump. And I have been critical of President Trump recently, and I've gotten some flack for it, mostly from Twitter people and folks on email who send me emails that are pretty crass, actually. But I don't want to dwell on that. I want to focus on what he actually said. So President Trump, while he was president, obviously appointed justices to our court that went on to help overturn Roe v. Wade. And so that was tremendous. That was tremendous.
Huge.
Yeah,
Republicans have been promising this for decades.
Yes, it was huge. And if it hadn't been President Trump, if it had been a different Republican president, it might have happened or it might not have happened. Some people listening are very opinionated about this, saying, oh, it would have never happened. We would have gotten terrible appointees to the Supreme Court. And other people are like, well, if we had another strong leader, we could have had good appointees either way. Either way, that's what happened during his presidency. Now, there are some other issues during his presidency. As an example, Planned Parenthood funding actually went up throughout his presidency. Not a lot of people know that, but HHS did do some things that were pro-life, the Health and Human Services department that he had control over as a part of the executive branch. But I think they could have done a lot more. And I was working behind the scenes to try to get them to do more, and they didn't do more. So that was a disappointment. But all of that is sort of besides the point, because what I care about today is what he is leading on as a candidate on life. And I have a lot of other issues with President Trump, which I'm not going to get into. That being said, President Trump recently came out and said, what? Noah, I'll let you share that.
He said it through a spokesman. But so his spokesman said for his campaign that President Trump was the most pro-life president ever. He appointed the judges who overturned Roe v. Wade. But now abortion is purely a state-level issue.
Yeah, so President Trump is basically saying, I'm done. I'm done. We got Roe overturned. You guys should basically kind of worship me forever. I mean, he really wants us to thank him forever for that. And if I'm president again, I'm not going to do anything at the federal level. And I think this is extremely toxic. All these candidates for decades have run on a human life amendment. They've run on Human Life at Conception Act at the federal level. They've run on protections for children at the federal level. And to say that now Roe is gone, the whole thing holding us back, the reason we don't have a Life at Conception Act federally is because of Roe v. Wade. Now that Roe v. Wade is gone, they're saying we're not going to do anything with the victory we were just given. We're going to literally leave the victory on the field and walk away when millions of lives are at risk. In what universe is that sane, just, it's certainly not courageous, it's cowardice. It's weird cowardice, though. It's like extremely illogical and defeatist coward. It's like you're being a coward when you don't even need to be a coward. You don't need to be a coward.
And what you're saying, Lila, about leaving the victory on the field, listen, overturning Roe v. Wade, like we said, I mean, obviously, huge victory, but it's a victory that put pro-life Americans in most states and certainly federally just at the beginning of the race. You know, it made it to where we could run the race. Like Roe v. Wade just said, you know, abortion's a constitutional right. You cannot pass any pro-life laws that are meaningful. And so by the court saying that's not true and setting us back to, I guess you could say, this neutral, and I think that that's wrong. I think the Constitution does protect life, but the Supreme Court at this moment says that, you know, the Constitution doesn't weigh in either way, and states and the federal government can do whatever they want. Yes, it's a big victory by being here, but it's not actually protecting children. So for a pro-life candidate who thinks abortion is wrong to say the federal government shouldn't be doing anything, I mean, are you even pro-life personally? Like, if you, what do you think about this, Lila? If someone says they're pro-life personally, but is not interested in the government, and especially our national government, doing something to stop abortion, are they pro-life?
No, they're not. And I mean, President Biden even says he's personally pro-life. I don't know if you've heard that, but he said he personally, I mean, years ago anyways, he said that he doesn't personally support abortion, but he supports a woman's right legally. So yeah, you can have all kind of nonsense reasons for defending your bad political strategy, but it doesn't make you a good candidate. It makes you a bad candidate, and people need to know. So that's what we're talking about this.
What's your response, Lila? So after this statement came out, you and our friends at Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America and some other great pro-life leaders, Students for Life, said that President Trump's comments were unacceptable, that the pro-life president, or the Republican pro-life presidential candidate, needs to support federal action.
Right.
And then it came out through, you know, who knows the complete validity of this, but through some unnamed sources, that President Trump is extremely upset about this and saying that the pro-life movement should be grateful. They should be grateful for him and everything he does.
Yeah.
So why aren't you grateful, Lila?
Yeah. I mean, you can be grateful that somebody did something really, really good a few years ago, and then when they do something really bad, you call them out on it. So I think this sort of like blind loyalty to a personality is horribly toxic when it comes to real lives on the line, because our job is not tribalism. Our job is justice, and our job is protecting the most vulnerable. And I don't know. I think it's completely disqualifying. It is disqualifying for any candidate to say the federal government, basically I as a leader have no role post Roe v. Wade in defending preborn lives. And unfortunately, that's what President Trump has done. And so he's disqualified himself from the nomination. That alone. I mean, there's other things you can argue are disqualifying too, but we're not going to get into that. I would say he's disqualified on life, and he is not the right leader for that. And I also think there's a lot of other reasons he's not the right leader.
And I won't speak for you, Lila, but it's like I encourage President Trump to walk back these comments and welcome him to embrace an aggressive federal role for protecting human life.
I mean, it would be smart if he wants to even have a shot, but I don't know. I don't know if he's going to do it.
One more thing, Lila, just about the conflict and what President Trump is saying about loyalty. I really think that voters, especially in our country, it's like we should care more about ideas and policy than candidates. Candidates at the end of the day are vessels for idea and policy. And so there should never be such a loyalty or an affinity for a candidate that you're willing to kind of put down like the actual policies and ideas you support.
I agree with that 100%. It's hard because in today's kind of social media world, it's so easy to just vote based on like your gut impression of somebody, and that regardless of their actual track record, regardless of like facts about them, you're still going to go with sort of the likability factor. And yeah, I think be a discerning voter, be a high information voter, right? Low information voters, they just kind of get this pop culture impression of somebody and go off of that versus like doing the research and understanding where the voter actually, or the candidate actually stands. Okay, well, let's move on from President Trump. And by the way, everybody listening, I'd love your input and your thoughts on this. You can send me an email. It's lila@gtbmedia.com. Did I get that right, Franco? Lila at GT, Franco's our awesome producer. Lila at gtbmedia.com. Send me your thoughts. I love to hear them. We'll do mailbags and ask me anything in the future. We're going to do one at the end of this episode here in a little bit. But let's go talk about the other candidates. So there's not just Trump in the race right now already. We've got several others. We're going to blast through a few of them. Not everybody has announced yet. There's probably more to come, but we've got a few. And let's just look at where they stand right now. What's the sort of trend? What is the trend of the candidates' positions on abortion right now? And we can help be trend makers, by the way. You listening, if you get involved in politics, you can be a trendsetter in the response that you have to these candidates with what they say early on. They really care about you. They really care about what you think about them because they are desperate for the nomination. So your opinion, what you say on social media, they have like their consultant social media listening mechanisms, letters to the editor that you're writing, the people that you're talking to, how you're responding in polls. Like it really matters. It makes a big difference right now. So please, please, please use your voice to demand, to call for real pro-life leadership. Okay, let's start with Nikki Haley. I think she's polling at 1%, Noah?
Yeah, well, between 1 and 5,
okay.
Usually most polls.
Now, I think Nikki Haley comes across as a very classy lady. First, let me just say that. I like that she is, I think a lot of people were impressed with her as an ambassador because she seemed to stand up so strongly for our values to the United Nations, right? Was that the...
To the UN, yep. She was the U.S. ambassador to the UN.
So I think, well, she actually had run-ins where she would present our values, and she did it in a strong way. So I think that's really likable and really good, obviously. But unfortunately, she's really weak on life. And she actually just gave a speech this week at Susan B. Anthony List's headquarters. And I tweeted my impression of it, which was that this is not the leadership pro-lifers are looking for. She said that obviously she went the Trump talking point that abortion is up to the states. Now, I think she did say she'd sign pro-life legislation, but she's not like going to lead on it. And then she had some good things to say about protecting life at conception. So that's good. I mean, she had the right talking points about the value of life, but the sort of political piece of, okay, they're human, so they deserve protection. That wasn't the connection. And then the last thing that she did that I really didn't like, and then I'm sure you have thoughts too, Noah, was she said that we need more contraception. And we'll do more episodes on this in the future, but contraception is not this antidote to abortion. I mean, that's another popular talking point, media narrative. Contraception actually creates a mindset and culture that sex has nothing to do with children and that you should have consequence-free sex as an adult or as anybody. And therefore, if you get pregnant on birth control, you should have the backup option of abortion. And in fact, 50% of people who have abortions, they were on birth control the month they got pregnant. So people using birth control are getting abortions. Birth control actually creates an abortion culture. That's my opinion. That's also what a lot of social data says. We'll talk about that more in the future. But what are your thoughts on Nikki Haley?
Well, I think there's a couple things that are important to say about someone like Governor Haley, is that she was a good ambassador, like you said. I think in a lot of ways she was a good governor. She signed pro-life legislation that came to her desk. Not super aggressive, but still good pro-life legislation. I think she's a good communicator for life. I believe that she is pro-life. I believe she thinks abortion is wrong. She told, even in her speech this week, a beautiful story about her husband being adopted and how her husband's, that potentially her husband's mother could have gotten an abortion and she wouldn't have her family. She struggled with fertility issues, conceiving children, and how that impacts her pro-life narrative. And so I think the reason I bring those up is I think, and you would agree, that, politics is all about storytelling.
It's
and
true.
so both of those stories are good anchors to then go, and that's why I believe we shouldn't be indiscriminately killing our children and we need to fully protect life. But unfortunately, she doesn't go into that next step, which is important. And she falls into the exact trap that you lay out in your Wall Street Journal article, which is she immediately says, well, the most aggressive pro-life protections are too unpopular nationally, and we can't expect, the things we're seeing out of Texas or Florida to happen on the national level. And it is sad because when you say something like we can't expect it, it's like, well, what are you doing here as a political leader if you're not here to move the narrative and talk about what's right, So it's like when you're running for president, when you're making these speeches and these policy commitments, you're saying what you think is ideal. And so it's sad when you can't lay out that you think would be ideal to end abortion and protect children.
Well said, Noah. I agree. Nikki Haley in my book is not our solution. So let's keep looking at who we've got to consider. And by the way, I'm not making any kind of announcement about who I'm endorsing or even if I will endorse, but this is more an initial analysis and thoughts on these candidates.
And every candidate has the capacity. I mean, it's the beginning of 2023 to move in the right direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. That's an important point. Okay, a couple others we're just going to run through with the time we have is Larry Elder. Larry Elder also announced his candidacy. He is someone that I actually endorsed in the governor recall Gavin Newsom special election for governor. This was last year, I think. And I don't really endorse candidates. I do it very sparingly, but I did it because it's kind of a Hail Mary pass to try to get our governor to change, our leadership here in California to change. And I thought he had a little shot, because there's a lot of unrest about Gavin Newsom being governor of California with the way he handled the pandemic, the way he handles crime, the way he handles so many things. And obviously his extremism on abortion doesn't help. And Larry Elder promised me when I endorsed him that he would be for, he would not do anything to expand abortion, that he would be for complete protection if there was the opportunity, and that he would work to defund all abortion in the state of California. So I thought that was good. As a presidential candidate, I don't know that life is his big issue. I mean, I haven't seen that historically with him, even in his punditry, in his talk show. I don't know that, I won't say he's like a true blue pro-life king, leader. So I don't know. It's kind of early to tell. Any thoughts on Larry Elder, Noah?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Larry's...
Has he weighed in on federal versus states yet?
He certainly hasn't since he announced his presidential campaign. But I once again, Larry Elder's another person that I believe is pro-life, and I also believe he's a really compelling advocate. But especially someone like Larry Elder, I wouldn't mean to be disrespectful to him. I don't think he's considered a front runner for the campaign right now. So a great differentiator for him would be taking an extremely strong stance on defending preborn children, because that's the thing. A lot of people are always afraid when there's too many candidates running. It's like that it gets muddied. The good thing about having multiple candidates running for the presidency is it can push the whole field in the right direction on certain issues.
Absolutely.
So that's why as we go through these candidates, even the ones that might not be considered kind of the A plus, this person is the odds-on winner. It's like I encourage them. It's like the field is wide open. Take the pro-life mantle, because it'll push the whole field in the right direction.
So true. Okay, let's do one more. There's also Vivek. He wrote Roke Inc. And his last name, Noah, can you pronounce his last name?
I think it's Ramaswamy.
Vivek Ramaswamy. He wrote Woke Inc. He's the kind of entrepreneur guy who is sort of kind of an independent in his approach, but he's running as a Republican. And he seems to be passionate about espousing conservative principles so far. I mean, he's kind of new to the scene. I actually will probably have Vivek on my podcast soon. We're going to try to interview these different candidates in coming months. But thoughts on Vivek?
Yeah, I mean, I think Vivek, he's approaching his campaign from the stance of an entrepreneur, which I think is interesting. He's approaching his campaign sort of taking on cultural issues first, which is in life is a cultural issue. I think he's mostly been focusing on kind of the woke agenda, right, of maybe issues having to do with sexuality and transgenderism. And he has said he is pro-life, but once again, he has not come out with a full position on how he thinks abortion should be handled and the human right to life protected. And so listen to Vivek, and hopefully maybe you can have a conversation with him in the future. You should come out for full federal protection,
Well, let's see. Maybe he'll announce that on the podcast. We'll see. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. And then there's obviously everybody who's thinking about him. He has not announced yet. It's likely, we're thinking he's going to, Governor DeSantis. And so I do want to talk briefly about him. Again, not announced yet. But I like some of the things I've seen so far. Obviously, it was good to see him sign the heartbeat law into law, the heartbeat bill into law. I don't like that the heartbeat law is just a heartbeat law. It doesn't protect all the children, just at the heartbeat. And then he has these exceptions in there that I thought were completely unnecessary. Obviously, not protecting a child because they're conceived in rape is ridiculous. And a woman is not benefited or healed from the trauma of rape by having an abortion. An abortion is another trauma. So to tell a victim of trauma, a survivor of trauma, that she needs an abortion, I think is not good medicine or healthcare. It's more traumatizing, and it's wrong to that child, of course. So I don't like that. But I do like that he's bold. He has some of that boldness that people found attractive in Trump, but I don't think he has all the baggage. I don't know, though. We'll see. We'll see what he ends up doing on life as a federal, at the federal level, what he says he'll do. He has implicated or insinuated a couple times that he believes it's a states' rights issue. Have you seen that, Noah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't like that. That's really bad. So he better clean that up before he runs. If he runs on it's a states' rights issue, he's in the Trump camp. It's just disqualifying.
Yeah, he's not a candidate yet, like you said. And I give him a lot of credit because there's a lot of things that a governor can put their focus on, and using his focus and the power of his agenda to move Florida really dramatically in the pro-life direction, I think is a really big win. Because people literally, it's like, because all the states around Florida have full bans, or Georgia has a 6-week ban, but all the other states have full protections for life. And so people were coming from Florida from across the South to get abortions. And that's going to be extremely challenging now, and a really good move, and save a lot of children by moving that protection to 6 weeks. But yeah, I can't exactly analyze what he's said on the federal level, because so far he's stuck to just what he thinks his state should do. But I hope I just encourage every single candidate, read the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. It's, the 14th Amendment was one of these Civil War amendments. So the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, and then the 14th Amendment, which was passed right around the same time, the 1860s, extended equal protection and due process under the law. And so what that means is that any state that has a homicide law, which is all 50 states, it's illegal to murder someone in all 50 states, that in all 50 states, it should be illegal to kill a preborn person, because that's all the 14th Amendment says is person. And person was understood at the time, as it's understood now, to mean from the moment someone comes into existence, which is the moment of fertilization.
Absolutely. Person is a human.
That's right.
Thank you, Noah. I wish we should do this again, especially when we hear more announcements and more updates. But that was great. A great run through. I hope this was helpful for folks listening as an initial entry into what's going on with the playing field, the political playing field, and life right now. All right, so now we're going to go to Ask Me Anything, and I've got some questions in. We're going to start with Instagram questions. Okay, first one, a personal one. Do you want more kids? How many? This is from Maria. Okay, I have 2 kids, as many of you may know, 2 little kids, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I would love more kids. Kids are the best. I tell my husband all the time, I can't wait to have more. And so, yeah, it'd be awesome to have at least 5. At least 5 kids would be amazing. Okay, here's a question from somebody who just asked. This is from a teen. It says, as a teen in a strong, healthy relationship, I'm finding it hard not to get too physical. Any suggestions? So this is about purity or chastity in your dating relationship. And first of all, I would say as a teen, I think dating can be totally a good thing. But keep in mind, the purpose of dating in the end is for you to grow as a person, for the person that you're dating to grow as a person, and to discern if you're supposed to marry this person. So if you're a very young teen and you're dating, I would just question that. Like, is this what you want to be spending your time in and investing yourself in this relationship, when ultimately are you prepared to be married soon? And it's likely that you're not. So that would be the first thing, is just kind of reconsidering or reframing the way you approach relationships at a young age. For me, I didn't start dating seriously until I was in college. And even then I wasn't like all in, because I was thinking about all these other things I felt called to do. And I didn't think I was going to be getting married soon. And so I just think that needs to be part of the thought process in even deciding to date, period. Secondly, when it comes to boundaries in a dating relationship, this is a great question, because you already know from the question that when you're dating, you're not married. So sex is for marriage, right? And so not for dating. And you want to have boundaries that are ultimately very loving for yourself and this person, because they're not your spouse. And you want to have intimacy with only your spouse. And so I would just say, listen, evaluate what are the things that make it difficult for us to have those boundaries. Are we spending a lot of time alone together in the evenings, as an example? Or are we, kissing each other and that's making us want to go further? And so should we walk that back and say, maybe we're going to not do all of this kissing, and we're going to instead just do like a quick kiss and say hello, and then that's it. I think having boundaries to recognize that there's a process to intimacy, and it starts with a lot of physical affection. And if it gets sexual, then that leads to more sexual things. And so don't do sexual things with your boyfriend or your girlfriend. That would be my advice. Just don't do it. And if it's really hard, you keep finding yourself falling into it, then take yourself out of those occasions where it's easier to fall into doing that. And that might look like you don't spend time together at night, or it might look like, on a practical level, you're just judicious about how you spend your time together. But I think that makes a huge difference, because bonding happens with close physical relationship. And, on a moral perspective, obviously it's designed for marriage, not just for dating or just another person that's not your spouse. So it's really great that you're thinking about this. Keep thinking about it. And be an example. Be an example in your relationship to others, and it will be inspiring for other people. Here's one. How do we lovingly convert AOC to be pro-life? I think this should be the goal. What a great question. It's cute. Listen, I always say we should pray for our opposition, our political opponents. I pray for Gavin Newsom. I think we should pray for President Biden. I think we should pray for AOC. I think we should pray for conversion. Conversions do happen. They do. Ronald Reagan was president. Obviously, he was a president, but before that, he was governor. Ronald Reagan was governor of California. He signed pro-abortion legislation. So he supported abortion as governor. And then he ended up becoming really pro-life. So that change is possible. So yeah, pray for AOC. I love that. Here's a good rule of thumb. If you get mad at people on the internet, right? You're reading news stories, you get mad at politicians, you get mad or really concerned. Let's say maybe you're not the angry type who responds with like frustration and anger. You respond with just sorrow and sadness. That's more me, by the way. I kind of get depressed. If you get sad or mad, use that emotion to trigger in you a habit of saying a prayer for that person or that situation. It transforms the entire experience, where now you are a force for good. And that media consumption that you just did, which maybe you didn't need to do, but you did it, whatever, we all do it. You're now turning it into an actual prayer. So it's union between you and God. And then you're actually asking for God and his grace on that situation or person. It's really an amazing thing. So that's one thing. I love this. Yes, convert AOC through prayer. That's the first step. Here's another one. How do you stay grounded when you have so many commitments with family, travel, etc.? I'm super blessed to have a husband who is just a good, normal in the sense that he is down to earth, grounded person with good wisdom and good balance in his own life. So that's hugely a blessing that I have a spouse and I really, when I was discerning to marry him and get married, it was like that was valuable to me, to just have someone that was really balanced and really wise and really healthy as a human being. So that helps a lot. And having routines, that are going to keep me balanced are key to good sleep, taking time to pray. I will say that being a mom and, being a parent and putting my kids, they're first. I'm thinking about them when I go to sleep. I think about them when I wake up, and I'm caring for them throughout the day. We're parents, right? That automatically grounds you a lot. I don't, when I do travel, I never leave my youngest son. I always take him with me. And when I have left my older son, I'll only leave him for one night and only a few weeks at a time, meaning like I'll go a few weeks and then maybe leave him one night and then go a few weeks. So I try to very rarely miss bedtime. And so I will do evening events, but sparingly. So I just think that like having balance where I don't think that my work is so important that it can deprive my boys of their mother primarily, that I make sure I'm there for them significantly, not just quality time, but quantity time. And I'll say no to things work-wise to ensure that I'm there with my boys. And that in and of itself is grounding because I'm not the center of the universe. My work is not the center of the universe, even though this mission, the mission for goodness, truth, and beauty, the mission for pro-life, there's such important missions to me. I don't have this mentality that I am the savior and I'm going to be the one to accomplish it myself. It's God, right? And I'm just a tool, and I can be a bad tool if I have bad balance in my personal life. So I think having that mentality makes a big difference. Lighthearted and lovely, waffles or pancakes? Okay, definitely depends on my mood. Waffles, delicious. I can make the most amazing waffles and pancakes. I've perfected the art. We do this on the weekends usually as a family. And you can make a really bad waffle or a really good one depending on your griddle and your recipe. But right now I think I'm in a pancake mode because I overdid waffles for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we just had waffles every Sunday. Now I'm doing pancakes, but they're both awesome. All right, guys, that's it for questions today. We will answer more on future episodes. Let me know what you guys think about this format. I've been doing a lot of interviews, but I do love to just talk. And yeah, I was talking with Noah. He's fantastic, but I love your thoughts. Should we keep doing solo episodes? Who else should we interview? What do you like from this podcast? What do you not like? I really value your feedback. You can do that by emailing me, lila@gtbmedia.com. That's gtbmedia.com. And please, please, please leave a review or give us 5 stars. Your review helps the podcast reach more people. And don't forget to subscribe to the new YouTube channel. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to leave a comment because your engagement on our YouTube channel will help YouTube actually suggest the videos to more people so we can actually get more traction on YouTube. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week.